I'm really glad to have this happening today. We had to cancel the Author Fest for the past 2 years due to stupid COVID. And so this is our first gathering of more than one author at a time, and I'm very grateful that all of the authors wanted to come and are here. I guess I'm going to kind of go through and do just quick names and intros, and then we'll start the microphone down at the end, and we'll pass it, and everyone has about 5 minutes to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Could be writing or book related would be good, but anything you want to talk about is fair game, okay? So down on the end here we have Dennis McDonald, and Dennis, he says that horror is best written in the dark. He was raised as a child of the 60s and fed a constant supply of black and white late-night monster movies. So his destiny was to put tales of macabre and mayhem to paper. Yes, and a lot of his books are set in Oklahoma, and they are very scary. So read them at your own. Okay, and then we have Nancy Chastain, a wild child inside a responsible adult. And Nancy found a release for her fun-loving, disobedient self inside her characters. Nancy loves tequila, dragons, and wizards. She has a collection of the mythical figures that decorate her office. She's always had an interest in the paranormal, reading anything and everything she can on the subject of psychics and mediums. The theory that the average human only uses 10% of the brain has always led to the question of what could a person be capable of if they tapped into the other 90%? Yes. Okay. Next we have Victoria Patton. And Victoria is forced to share her home with a husband, 2 teenagers, 2 dogs, and 2 cats. If she isn't plotting her escape, she's using her time in the Coast Guard doing search and rescue, law enforcement, and her forensic chemistry to figure out the best way to hide all the bodies. I get it. So if she has any free time, she drinks copious amounts of whiskey and binge watches Netflix and Hulu. I kind of see why you two are friends. That is great. Okay. Peggy Chambers calls Enid home, and she's an award-winning published author. Ian's Magic is her 9th book. She writes several genres, from children's books, young adult, suspense, pulp fiction, and comic books. She has 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and lives with her husband and her dog. Bobbie Mardis is on here somewhere. Bobbie Mardis came to Enid by way of Indianapolis. She came here to attend Phillips University. And I believe she moved away for a while, and then she came back to be closer to family. She raised 5 children in Norman. She's been a member of the Enid Writers Club and the Oklahoma Writers Federation for many years, and is a past president of Enid Writers Club. She was voted a lifetime member for her passionate support of the club, so that's quite an honor. She has 1 book that has been published called Triple Creek, which is set in eastern Oklahoma and is so good, and has a new one coming out. And Mary Coley grew up in Enid, and I believe she used to play on the Taft playground.
You bet.
You bet. Yeah? Okay. Were you a Taft Tiger?
I was a Taft Tiger.
Wow.
Went to Miss Lucy's kindergarten.
Okay.
Taft Tiger.
Excellent. Well, Mary's a lifelong writer, and I believe, and I don't have it on these notes, but you wrote your first book, your first story in like second grade, and your first...
Chippy the Squirrel.
Tippy the Squirrel.
Chippy, yeah.
That sounds amazing. You still have a copy of that? I'd really like to see that sometime. Coley's a graduate of Enid High and Oklahoma State University with a Bachelor of Science in Zoology and Communications, so she can talk to the animals. So it started in 2nd grade with Chippy the Squirrel. Her Master's of Science in Education and Environmental Studies. Coley's first book was Cobwebs in 2013, and her 8th mystery, Blood on the Mother Road, came out this year. Paula Benge, I've known Paula for years. She has been a member of the Enid Writers Club and has been very supportive of all of the events that they have done. She has helped out with different critique groups and writing workshops, and now she's a published author. Yay! So she's the author of the romantic fantasy novella, A Neapolitan Fairy Tale at Lake Okoboji. Did I say it right?
That's right.
Okoboji, okay. Very cute story. I like fairies. That was a lot of fun. And I believe you have a new book coming out?
Hopefully next month.
Next month. Okay, well, we are now going to make me stop talking. We're going to start down here with Dennis, and we're just going to go.
Oh, I'm the first.
Yes, you are.
All right, I'm Dennis McDonald. I've lived in Enid for 65 years. I graduated Enid High in 1973, and I was the biggest nerd in high school. And that was before nerds were cool. They're cool nowadays. But I had a lifelong passion and started writing when I was 13 years old. It took me 40 years to write my first book. So again, I had a family to raise and everything. But I write horror. Well, actually, I started to write fantasy. I wanted to be a fantasy author, but I was a part of a website called Fan Story. And I don't even know if it's still online anymore. But on Fan Story, you could enter in contests and win prizes and money. And one was a horror writing contest, and it's in here. And I won $400 at it for Halloween horror stories. And after that, my horror stories became more interesting, more marketable than my fantasy. So I always still want to be a fantasy story writer. I do have a fantasy novel. I don't have it with me, but I do have one published. And that was probably about, 2010, 2011. And then I decided, I went to a writer's conference and I heard about, this is about the start of the Amazon craze. And I heard about self-publishing on Amazon, and I took these 2 books and I wrote them for iUniverse. And it cost me about $1,400 to have them edited and everything back then. And I sold these on iUniverse. Well, this is at the time when the craze was beginning with Amazon's, where you can buy books for sale on Amazon. And iUniverse was handling the marketing on my book, but they were only selling about, I get a work monthly quarter, and I only make about $160 some, And they had on Amazon, on Kindle, they were $9 each. And I was like, how can nobody's gonna pay $9 for an unknown author book. I'm seeing other authors making tons of money on Amazon, and they're selling them for $2.99 or whatever. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and write one myself and put it out. And this is my zombie novel, Undead Flesh. It's set in Oklahoma. That's Enid burning on the background of the cover. And I put it out myself. I paid, I think, $1,100 for a prominent editor in the horror business to edit it. And I put it on Amazon. I made $2,300 the first month in sales. So I decided to take my contract, in my contract with iUniverse, these had different covers, and re-release my first 2 books on Amazon, and they've done real well. Altogether, I've made about $20,000 between I love conventions. As a matter of fact, I don't even market these books. I sell them at conventions. I'm a terrible marketer. Don't take any advice from me on marketing. I don't have brands. I don't have anything. I barely even have a website. So don't ask me any advice about marketing. But I can tell you about writing. And so that was the greatest decision I ever made, was releasing these books myself. And is everybody hearing me all right?
Yes.
Okay. And then I have a fantasy novel. I released my fantasy novel. And I was going gung-ho writing, and then I came down with a brain tumor about 4 years ago. And I'm still returning to normal with my writing after the brain tumor. So I'm still struggling with it. Fiction writing that I used to do still eludes me a bit. It's hard for me to form the words together. But however, I was a game designer before, and I put out my first game book in '92. So, even though I couldn't write anymore, I've released my game rules. And this is my current project that I'm working on. Even though I do have 20,000 words into 13 More Nightmares and 20,000 words into my fantasy novel. So that's pretty much my story. I go to a lot of conventions. I've been all over the country at mostly comic book conventions. And for your horror writers, have you ever heard of Texas Frightmare? Do you write serial killer novels? Texas Frightmare. It's a huge gathering of horror fans. It's in Dallas, Texas. But it is, I used to sell 100 books there back in the day, but now its prices and everything have gone up because we have so many celebrities there. But if you're into horror writing, always check out, see if you can get it. With the pandemic, I don't know what the situation is. And they canceled last year, and they're having it again in September. You might want to check it out, see if they got any openings. But yeah, Texas Frightmare. And Texas Frightmare is a place, it's in Dallas, Texas, it's a place where the celebrities are pushing out the vendors. There's so many celebrities there. So anyhow, that's pretty much my life story. I have 5 minutes, right?
You are down to 13 seconds left. You've done very well.
I'm not going to bust out a karaoke song.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my story. And I'm going to pass the wand to Nancy.
All right.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am not from Enid or Oklahoma. I moved here in 2004. I'm from southeast Kansas and to Hennessy by way of Los Angeles. I took a long trip around to get here. I write romance, suspense, paranormal thrillers, and recently just released a YA fantasy because I have 14 grandkids and they all kept saying, when are you going to write something I can read? So I did. It was challenging compared to the other books I write. It was very challenging, and you would think that it wouldn't have been so hard, but it really is when you start thinking about your grandkids and what you want your other people's kids and everything to read. So there is actually 9 more coming out in my series by next October. 2 other authors have joined me into the series, so we're turning it into a world of magic and mayhem. My first book, well, I started as a blogger because I'm a reading addict. I would read anything and everything I could get my hands on. Always have. Always wanted to be a writer, but had kids, life, everything pushed it away. I published my first book. I'm an indie published author at 54, 4 years ago. When I was a blogger, I started doing reviews for other authors. Just on Facebook, started blogging. And the other authors started reaching out to me. Going, will you review my book? Will you and I got a reputation for being a reviewer. And I don't sugarcoat when I review. It doesn't do the authors any good. But I'm not cruel. There's a difference the way some people review books. I'm honest. And if I found errors, I would privately message the author because they would send out advanced reader copies to me and tell them, hey, you might check this paragraph here. And I made lots of friends that way. Well, I had one friend, she had sent me every book she had. She goes, review these for me, please. And she just one day asked me, why aren't you writing? And I just sat there and I thought, why aren't I writing? My kids are grown. I have grandkids. I'm not raising my grandkids. It's just my husband and I, a 7-year-old very mouthy macaw, and a 10-year-old parrot, and now a puppy that is the size of a horse. So it's like, I have no excuse. Why am I not writing? So I sat down and 3 months later, Obsession was sent off to the editors. It just came pouring out. And I haven't stopped. I have one book, another book that was just released last month. It's called Honor Thy Father. It's loosely based on Hansel and Gretel. It's part of an anthology collection of fairy tales. And I touched on a very dark, it's my darkest book. I touched on a dark current event of human trafficking in that book. And that one's turning into a series. It was just a recurring nightmare I had that something told me I had to write this series. My marketing director and everybody kept saying, Nancy, that's very dark. But when you start having reoccurring nightmares of the same book over and over again, it's time to write it. And so I started waking up and writing down what I was dreaming about. And I didn't expect it to come out in Hansel Gretel, but it did. And it actually really worked for that fairy tale. Then there's 3 other books planned in that series. And then the 29th, another collection is Voyage of Tokyo with 8 other authors. And I'm doing one there, and that one's just erotica. Is all that book is. It's my first full erotica book. So I touch on all genres. I do not want to be pigeonholed into one genre. And I get bored. Like when I read everything. So if I'm going to read everything, I might as well write everything and see what resonates with me. But actually, the kids' books have really resonated with me and a lot of my friends. So the adults are enjoying it as much as the kids are. But of course, I had to get the grandkids' opinion on it before I did anything. And thankfully, they all approved because I guarantee they'll tell me otherwise. And that's all there is for me.
Hi, I'm Victoria M. Patton, and I never wanted to be a writer. Never thought of being a writer. Half the time I can't put a full sentence together. That's why I pay for an editor. Actually, I have a degree in forensic chemistry, and I was in the Coast Guard for 8 years, so I wanted to do law enforcement and crime scene investigation, and then I had kids. So at the time, my husband made the most money, and it was like, whoever makes the most money gets to leave the house. So I stayed at home. So fast forward, I think my kids were around 12 or 13, somewhere around 2014-ish. I had a knee surgery, and I was high from pain meds. And I was reading a ton of books, and I was like, surely I could write a better crime novel than this person wrote this book. And I'm not talking about Patterson. I'm talking about like somebody just off of Amazon. So I thought, sure, I'll just sit down and write. And I wrote a book, and then I learned everything I did wrong with that book at the Oklahoma Writers Convention and made some corrections. And lo and behold, I have like, 7 books later. 5 in one series, which is my main series, the Damien Kane series. And they involve heinous criminals, serial killers. Sometimes they're found, sometimes the killer is actually caught, and sometimes they're not. I think it's in my blood though, because my dad was killed by the mob, and when I was about 5, we had to move overseas to get away from everything that was going on. So we traveled around overseas, and then when we came back, my mom's first husband was the last POW to come back with from the Vietnam War. And then it's just amazing the family tales we have, but I think it's just in my blood, the murder, the mayhem, mystery, and I live with 2 teens. I think I secretly plot their demise in all of my books. But that's it, that's how I got started. Like I said, I never intended to be a writer. I'm surprised that I've written as many books as I have. And actually people seem to like them because they buy them. And it's my full-time job. So there you go.
I'm Peggy Chambers. I'm a hybrid author, which means I'm self-published and I'm also published by traditional publishers. And I write several different genres. I've got, my latest is Ian's Magic, which is a middle grade reader. And I also write some young adult novels and then some adult novels as well. I often write in Oklahoma. I write in Oklahoma about Oklahoma. My Keystone Lake series take place over in eastern Oklahoma. And then I have the Gloams Valley books take place over at Heavener at the Heavener Runestone. I started writing. My first book was published in 2014 called The Apocalypse Sucks, and it's a silly fantasy thing that I wrote for Airship 27, and they liked it, and it's done really well. It's even got an audio book done. From there, I went to other different things. With my Ian's Magic, which is my latest one, I wanted you to know that Ian is a third grader who's discovered he can perform magic by using his math skills. And if his math is right, and his fingers tingle when he wishes something, then he can perform magic. And his greatest goal right now is to win the annual math contest. And he has a friend, well, he has a nemesis that is also good at math. His name is Thomas. And Thomas wants to win this math contest too. So the question is, will Ian win the math contest? Will he win it fair and square, or will he use his math magic to try to cheat and win it that way? I always like different genres. Haven't figured out yet which one I want to write, kind of like other people have talked about. I read everything. I'll read a cereal box in the morning, it doesn't matter. So I read it, so I try to write it. I am leaning more towards adult suspense these days. My Sandhill Island books take place off the coast of Corpus Christi. I have 2 of those and a novella that goes with it that are taking place there, and I'm working on the 3rd novel at this time. In The Blooming Justice, which takes place at Keystone Lake, I have the 2nd one called Blooming Greed that'll be out soon, hopefully this year sometime, I'm not sure when. I think my favorite subject in school was always literature. And I had a lot of teachers say, Peggy, you're out picking daisies, which means I wasn't paying attention. My mind was wandering, and I was off on some tangent. But that, I do believe that imagination helps me today with my books. I'm a big fan of the classics. I'm a big fan of children's literature and a big fan of Stephen King. And all that means that I'm just conflicted. I don't know what I want to write or what I want to read, so I try it all. But like I said, I'm leaning more towards the adult suspense novels these days. I just had a few stories I wanted to get out of me before I went on and decided where I wanted to write.
I don't know if you can see, but I have one book in front of me instead of piles. Because I don't consider myself a writer. I had one story I wanted to tell. And I got that idea from a book that my book club was reading about the Indian removal into eastern Oklahoma and then how they were taken advantage of. And so that's what this book is about. It's called the Triple Creek, the ranch that is located on an allotment that was stolen from some Native Americans. I wanted to tell that story. And I started out writing a short story because that's what I've written since I was, I don't know how old. I have a binder, a thick binder with all the short stories that I had started. But as I began to develop this story, I began to despair because I realized it was too big for a short story. I was going to have to write a book. And it really set me into a funk because I didn't want to write a book. But that was only I could get the story out, so I did. I think that my love of writing comes from the fact, as most of you have said, that I've read a lot. I read as a young girl. And when you read a lot, you get an idea of how a story is developed. You get the shape, you get the use of language, and that becomes part of your thinking when you begin to write your own story. The job I had, my career, was writing fact-based material. Technical articles, speeches, brochures. And writing fiction is very different because I did not have the experience or the knowledge in how to write descriptions or emotions. It's been very difficult for me to work on that area of writing. I don't know how to find the words for that. However, the more I read other people's writings, I can get an idea of how it's done. Early on, in raising my family, I lived in Norman, and they had a wonderful short story writing class at the Norman Moore Votech. I hope our Votech here will do some classes in writing. And that got me started more on how to really shape a story. I've never tried to publish anything. And I did this one on Amazon. And it's done okay, but I did not, my goal was not to sell a book. I wanted to tell a story, and I wanted to make it available for my family and friends without them having to, without having to go through it. So my path is quite different than the others on this panel. But it's been a good path, and I'm happy to share what little I've done with you.
Hello, I'm Mary Coley. I was born and raised here in Enid. I live in Jinx now, which is close to Tulsa, and have been over in that region of the state for about 25 years. So I wrote my first story in the 2nd grade, Chippy the Squirrel, and to rave reviews, I'm quite sure. And then I actually wrote a spy novel when I was in the 8th grade, and from start to finish, and it was The Girl from Uncle. And that was a big popular, The Man from Uncle was a big popular TV show at the time. So unfortunately that manuscript did not survive my high school years, but I did go on and continue to write stories and to write poetry and all kinds of things when I was young. But life intervened, as it so often does, and I married and had 2 children after college, and I moved to Ponca City, which is not too far from here. And while I was there, I was a newspaper reporter, and then I was the PR director at the hospital. And then I decided I wanted to go back and learn a little bit more about science, because I'd always loved science. My degree was zoology and communication. And so I had been writing nonfiction stuff related to nature and the environment for a long time before I decided to go back to school. And then I ended up writing some science curriculums, and from there went on to work for the Nature Conservancy and learned over at the Tallgrass Prairie about the Native American issues in Pawhuska, Killers of the Flower Moon, which you all have read that. But before that story was written, I started writing my first book, which came out in 2013, which is Cobwebs. And it involves a woman who does not really know her family history. Many of us have older relatives that don't want to talk about their family history. And this woman in the book is kind of the same way. My mother had passed away, and I realized that I had a pretty empty hole as far as some of my genealogy went. So between that and learning about the Osage murders during my job, during my work, I came up with this story, which became this book. And I realized that I wanted to write, and so I had begun to join organizations and go to workshops and work on my craft and really learn how to write fiction, which I had always read, but I had not studied how to write it. I was a nonfiction writer, a white paper writer, a brochure writer, all of those things that you do to make a living. So anyway, 2013, this was finally published, and I wasn't sure if I was going to write another book, but other stories kept kind of coming to me, and I was pretty well obsessed with the northeastern part of the state. A lot of it was because that was where my mother was from, and that was where the void was in my knowledge. And so the second book that I wrote, it's the same protagonist. She's a science teacher, actually, that comes to Pawhuska to help her aunt, but she lives in New Mexico. So in book 2, I had to take her back to New Mexico. And then I began to realize this is going to be a series, and I'm going to call it the Family Secret Series, because in each one of these books, she is into her face is thrown a secret that some family member has kept. So in Cobwebs, it's her entire family that has been hiding the fact that she has to uncover. In Aunt Dan's, it's her deceased husband's secret that she has to solve when his daughter is kidnapped or goes missing. She comes back to Oklahoma in Beehives, which is set at Osage Hills State Park in between Pawhuska and Bartlesville. And this time, it's her mother's secret. She realizes that there's a whole lot in her mother's youth that she hasn't talked about when she finds a trace of her mother's first boyfriend that she never knew she had. And there's a hermit living at the park who is found murdered, and she gets caught up in that. The fourth book in the series is called Chrysalis, and she is now living in Ponca City with her new husband. I lived in Ponca for 16 years, so lots of information there that helped me build this story. I combined the mystery of her current husband's secret with the old history of the old road race. There used to be a Formula One race there in Ponca City around Lake Ponca. And so I tie that into what she finds out about her new husband. His wife has recently been, his first wife has recently been disinterred because there are questions about her death. So that's the Family Secret series. In between a couple of those, I've written some standalones. Crystalline Crypt starts with a woman in Tulsa whose best friend disappears, and she travels after her down to the Wichita Mountains. And then Blood on the Cimarron is set in Stillwater area. My dad's from that area, and so I utilized a lot of knowledge about places that we went where he grew up, as well as the old family property that we used to have there. And in this one, the main character is a newspaper reporter. And then I recently finished the second book in what is going to be that series called Blood on the Mother Road. So this woman in these is an investigative reporter. In the first book, she was writing a piece on a horse rancher who was well known for saving Mustangs. And he was being lauded because of his work with some of the Mustangs from the West that were being brought to him and then resold, or rehomed as they call it. Blood on the Mother Road, the same journalist is trying to come up with a story for the 100th anniversary of Route 66, which is coming up soon. And she goes to the fictional town of Persimmon to try to find out the difference that the road made to the town when it started, and then what happened in the town after the turnpikes bypassed it. Where did those people go? Where did those businesses go? What happened? So, as you can hear from what I'm saying, I write mystery suspense, and I have some thoughts about writing some fantasies and also some YA, but I love mysteries, and so that probably will be my major emphasis. I do hope to write some more short stories for a little while. I've just finished this last book, and I've got pages of little story ideas that I think could be little short stories. Maybe one or two of them will be a larger work, but I'm not sure. So that's a little bit about me.
I'm Paula Benge. I've lived here, I've lived here for over 30 years. I was thinking this morning that I've lived in a lot of circles here. You start out, as a young married, and then you have kids, and then you live in that circle of people who have kids, and school activities and sports. And so I never really get out of that circle. But that's kind of what led to me writing. When my daughter left home and I had an empty nest, so then, I'm in the empty nest circle, and she went to college to play softball. The newspaper showed an article for the Enid Writers Club that they were going to have Jamie McGuire, a New York Times best-selling author from Enid, And I was like, oh my gosh. So I went to the meeting and I met Peggy walking down the hall, trying to find out what door Jamie went to, trying to find her, and come to find out she forgot to come. But I met all of these people who were writing. Some of them were published, some of them just wanted to write for fun. They were friends, they were the nicest people I'd ever met. And they encouraged me to stay, so I kept coming back, and eventually Jamie did come and talk, and it was fantastic. But really, it was the circle of writers that drew me in and kept me, and drew out that desire to write that I never thought I could really do. So I think the way that you join the club was you read something that you've written, like 3 pages, to the club, you read that, and then you're a member. I did that, and a couple of months later, one of the ladies, I was still in that college softball circle, so we were traveling to all the games, and she said, what are you writing? And I said, I don't have time to write, I'm just going to watch softball, that's all we get time to do. And she said, okay, write a softball story and I'll read it. So, 2013, I started writing a softball story, a girl who goes to college, plays softball. And in between, I've entered contests, I've gone to writing workshops, I've been to little writing workshops, I've been to the big ones, I read a lot, and I listen to a lot of educational things on writing. And in that softball story, I made every mistake you could make. And in between, I started a lot of other things, and then there was a submission requirement or request from a small publisher. They asked for people to write novellas that are placed in an ice cream store with that lake feeling, that family feeling. And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. So I wrote a story for that, and that was actually my first published story. They accepted it. I got to the experience of having somebody pick out your cover, edit it for you and all that. And that was so much fun. And then I thought, I'll finish something else and I'll see what I can do with that. But I keep coming back to the softball story. So I just hired a person to make a cover. And finally, since 2013, I'm finally going to publish the softball story, and I framed my covers, so there you go. First peek. And I'm so excited. Maybe next month, August 4th. And also, because the publisher that I went through allowed me to have the audio rights to my fantasy book, set in Lake Okoboji, Iowa. If you've never been there, it's really fun and pretty. I made that into an audiobook, so I had the chance to work with a narrator and, be the producer and work on accents and work on speed and work on, so it's been a wild ride to do this publishing thing, but the writing part, I think, it helps you know yourself better, helps me know myself better. I know what I think because I'm writing now, because you can't really hide from yourself when you're writing. And I think having the Enid Writers Club be the special place that it is we have a critique group, and whenever you know you need to have 3 pages for critique next week, you do write, you sit down and do it. So I'm a personal trainer, and I've gotten to work with a lot of my kids' sports and things, so I write at home on a treadmill. And if I'm not writing there, then I go to a coffee shop, because I found that I can't write at the house otherwise, it doesn't get done. There's too many other things. So that's kind of my story.
So we've had several people talk about the Enid Writers Club, and you do meet once a month, again, beginning in September.
September through May, on the first Thursday of each month out at Northwestern. At least we hope so this year. Last year the pandemic knocked everything out. We meet starting at 6:30 on the first Thursday, and he's out at Northwestern. That's all I have.
Yeah, There are some brochures up at the front about Enid Writers Club with some more information. The dues are not expensive. $20. $20, come on, that's great. And a great group of people. There are also some brochures up there for Friends of the Library, if you're interested in a way to support this public library. So I have just a few questions that some other folks have helped me come up with. And I guess just whoever wants to answer can. Some of you have already covered the answers to these, but what do you think is the most important element in writing? That's a big question, I know.
Passion.
Passion? Okay.
It's got to be something inside you, it's got to come out. If you don't have that something, it's not going to happen. You can mess around with it for years and years, but if you don't have the passion to really, and you can't just think, oh, I'm going to be the bestseller or whatever. I remember I wrote one author and she was like, oh, I got to sell 10,000 books for my first book, or I'm not going to continue writing. That's not. If you're thinking about that, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to write because you have to write. And everybody here knows what I'm talking about. You have to write. You've got to write that story. You've got to write that imagination or whatever. It's got to burn inside you before it comes out onto the pen book. So that's what I call it.
Yeah, the voices and people, and I've said it to people that's outside the book world, and they think I'm nuts, but you literally have voices in your head telling you what they want to say. That they tell me, the characters tell me their story. It's not like I'm writing their story for them. I get so invested in my characters, they're telling me, no, I don't like what you just did there, delete that. I want to do it this way. Because no matter how much I try to outline a book, it's going to go this way. No, they're taking a left turn somewhere. And I'm like, okay, that's new. But you have to have the passion, and you have to listen to whatever's guiding you to do it. Because for some reason, you're supposed to put the words that way.
So I know that, oh, go ahead.
I just think you have to start.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to start, and then the passion sometimes will grow the more you get, but you have to start, and then you have to finish.
So,
I've heard writers say, you have to put your butt in the seat. And if you don't put your butt in the seat and start typing, you can't do it. And if you say to yourself that you can't put your butt in that seat, well, then you're not going to write. So that's the thing, is just actually sitting, trying to sit. They say every day. I confess I'm not necessarily an everyday writer. I have my time of the day that I write better than other times. And some people that can't write at home, find another place to write. But even if you just write a page a day, tomorrow that's a page that you've gotten done. So keep it up, keep writing.
So, we've all seen the t-shirts and the coffee mugs that say, be careful or you'll end up in my next novel.
Right.
Have you ever done that?
Yes. I'm doing it right now. I'm thinking about the characters right here. This is the thing I'm thinking about, how they're going to be in my next story.
This
It's
is
a constant process.
it's from my hometown.
Okay.
My best friend's in it. Yes, I told her, but I had to promise the skeletons would not come out.
Okay.
But the businesses, the people, they're in it.
Yeah.
And I grew up in that town. It's a town of 2,500 people. It's called Cherryville, Kansas. And I'm related to at least 1,500 of them. And I did the dumbest, scariest, smartest thing I've ever done, was I debuted it at a big festival in that town. And talk about intimidating. When you're related to that many people, and they come to see if they're in it. They do. And then they critique it because they think that might be them. And the people that's in there, they knew they were going to be in there. They were forewarned and asked if they could be in there. But the others would come up, even the police department come up, because it's about a serial killer. And there hasn't been a serial killer there, but, except for the vendors. But the police officers come up, and they wanted to know if they were portrayed correctly in the book, and if their names was used in the book. It was funny how many people come up and just come through it to see the names, to see if they could find it.
So would you still write if you didn't get paid?
We, you don't think about the money.
Yeah,
do
you
the right.
can't not right.
For like the first 4 years, I think I made 25 cents an hour with all the time and effort I put into every book.
Yeah.
It took 4 years before I started making an income. And now I finally actually make a very good income, but it was a long time. If I had given up, I would have missed it. So you don't write for the money. You really don't. If you're really writing, you write because you can't think of anything else to do, and all you want to do is sit down and get this story out, and the characters, and you fall in love with the places and the people in your books. And the money comes later, if you're lucky. And if not, you're still lucky because you got to write something that you really enjoy.
When I first started, I had written this one little book, and I got Airship 27 to publish it. And when I came up with the Gomes Valley ideas, I really knew that I wanted to self-publish them. I was down at the Heave and the Runestone one time, and if you've never been down there, you should try it. There was a little boy running around, and his daddy was an archaeologist, and he wanted to look at the stone. And that was all it took right there. I knew this was a magical place, and something had to be written about it. So I self-published these two. But after that, when I started writing some adult suspense novels, I met a publisher at the Oklahoma Writers Federation conference, and they picked me up. And I really have enjoyed writing for Wild Rose Press. Like we've talked about, there's no money in it. But I do have a good background and good people to help me out. I've written several things for Wild Rose Press. And then I tried with a children's publisher called Doodle and Peck, and they're out of Yukon. They do mostly family-friendly books. They mostly children's books. So I have 3 different publishers and then myself. And it's a different ballgame no matter how you go at this. I've talked before about I don't like the way I formatted this one. And I did this one myself so I can redo it. I know there are mistakes in this one I can't get fixed because the publisher won't fix them. It's different. Trying different ways, I think, is a good way to figure out what it is you want to do.
When I started, this was the first book, and I found a publisher who wanted it. But they wanted me to make a lot of changes that would change the overall tone of the book, and I couldn't do it. So I learned all about self-publishing, created my own imprint company, and began to self-publish, and so I format and I do the book covers and I do everything. But I learned it took 3 years before I published that book from when it was wanted by the publisher to learn to make sure I did it correctly. And I'm glad I did. It's a hard road though, and I'm a wide publisher, so I wasn't just on Amazon and KU only. And you have to really, there's like your writing and then there's the business side, and you have to think of yourself as a business when you're an author. Somebody once said, it was at OWFI one year, they said the best time to self-publish is if a publisher wants you. If a publisher offers you a contract, that's when you know you have something viable. And I was like, okay, wait, I have something viable. I just had to learn how to do it.
I started the early days, about 2010, self-publishing did not have the respect that it has now. And I went to a horror writers conference in Austin, Texas, and there was a lot of big wheels there. There was Peter Straub, there was, a bunch of horror authors there. But anyhow, I went there, and at that time, the self-publishing thing was just starting, and I was told it was going to be the ruin of anybody that's self-publishing. And that time there, the whole thing with Amazon was just getting started. Everything, it had a really bad name, self-publishing. But that stigma has long since gone. Well, when self-publishing came along, these were the gatekeepers for the publishing industry, was up there holding the gates closed to those that can make it, the John Grishams or whatever. But when the self-publishing came along, it opened up those gates for other people. And frankly, the publishing companies had to look down on them and say, okay, well, these people are making money. And what happened was that in the 90s, the rock music learned this first. Rock bands tried hard to get recording contracts. And they could pick it, the door slammed on them. So they said, well, you know what? We've got the internet, we can market our own CDs, we can go on our own sites, we can go to our own merchandise, we can do our own tours. And then authors came along and said, hey man, we can do that kind of stuff too. And that's where the whole thing opened up. It's a whole different world now than when I was growing up. So you got a lot more options. For all you want to be authors out there, you got a lot more options now it's unbelievable.
There are a lot of self-published authors who get picked up now by Penguin, Random House, all places, and they're offered $1 million contracts to bring over those entire series that some of these, Mark Dawson is one of them who's been recently picked up.
Jamie McGuire.
Jamie McGuire, yep. So there's a lot. And what's funny is you don't know is there's a lot of publishing companies under the Amazon umbrella that are actual publishers, but they're under the Amazon umbrella and you can't submit, but they'll often, if you're booked as well, there were people who've been picked up by under those just, so there's opportunity.
People generally want to help new authors. They do. I wouldn't be where I am without Peggy, who helped me on my first conference ever. She guided me through the library my first time. That's the first time I ever appeared anywhere. Victoria's answered numerous questions for me. The authors I read for are all eager to help, but just ask. You'll be surprised some of the places you're going to get the information from.
I think picking a genre and sticking with it, which I haven't done. Maybe I will.
Why would that be better?
I really think when we talked about Jamie McGuire, for instance, she writes what they used to call new adult, which is high school to college age romance. And Jamie knew what she wanted, and she went in that direction. And Jamie has made all the difference. Peggy's been all the place. You know, I'm not comparing myself to Jamie, but my point is that I think if you settle on a genre like horror, normally it's a better idea to stick with one style. I've learned an awful lot about children's books and YA and adult writing, and Pulp Fiction is another ballgame. So I've learned things, but if you're out trying to make a buck, settle on a genre.
How do you keep it straight?
Whiskey.
Hey, I like it.
That's what I was going to say.
It depends on what mood
I was
you're
going to
in.
say tequila.
But generally, when I settle on a book, I mean, before I had my brain surgery, when I settled on a book, that was my focus, generally.
I have 4 going right now.
Yeah.
4 books going now? And how many series?
3.
Okay,
It's whatever character's talking at that time.
okay.
Now for my game system, I'm writing lots of different stuff for my game system, my game. But that's a whole different type of writing. That's a rule writing. It's not creative writing. Well, I'm a slow writer. This took about a year. This took about a year to write. This took like 14 months. And before I had my brain surgery, I was going to put out 1 novel a year. But I'm not the fastest writer. I'm not putting out 2,000 words before breakfast like Stephen King does. You know, and I wrote in the middle of the night. I get up in the middle of the night and start writing in the dark. So that's how this came about.
In the dark.
In the dark, with only the light of my computer screen. Yes, I freaked myself out too.
It's your work then, so
So a lot of those are going to be what they call vanity publishers, and that's where they're going to submit to them, and then they're going to say, if you pay us X amount of dollars, we can help get your book out. You want to stay away from those. A website called Writer Beware, writerbeware.com. That's all she does. I forget her name, who it is. That's all she does, is she talks about publishing companies that you need to stay away from. If they ask you for money up front, don't do it. But if you submit to Simon & Schuster or Random Penguin House, there's a way you have to do it, and most of those you have to have an agent. So you're gonna query an agent. That's your first step. So if you have a book you've written and you wanna get it to somebody, you're gonna look at, let's say it's a Western book. You're gonna find all the agents that are Western, they handle Western genres, and you'll query them. And that means you're gonna write a letter that says, hey, I'm Bob, and I wrote this really great book, here it is, and there's a way you do it, there's all examples of it on the web. You're gonna send them that letter, and usually in there you send a few pages of your book. If they want it, they're gonna ask you for their manuscript, or maybe more chapters to then get an idea. Those are the legitimate routes to go, and that's how you do that. You get an agent. Those agents then sell you to Penguin or Random House or Simon & Schuster. That's how you get in those doors. Every once in a while, though, they will have, and I forget what some of them are, some on here might know. I know Wild Rose, you can apply directly to them without an agent. There are some you can do that. You can find them online at their websites, and they'll tell you how to do it. So stay away from vanity publishers and just go to Writer Beware before you look at something.
No, I was just gonna say, yes, I had lots of time to write, because I couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But you couldn't go anywhere to sell your books, like Dennis talks about selling most of his at
I do comp, I don't do any marketing.
All of our
They're coming.
events were canceled.
I did do an awful lot more online, just trying to promote the books online and that sort of thing.
See, I sell mostly online. I do these events for fun and to get out of my house. I've been a stay-at-home mom, so I had the luxury of being at home. I found the pandemic just made me not want to write. Because I was like, oh God, I don't want to do anything. So I watched a lot of Hulu TV. And I will tell you this, I don't write anything about the pandemic in my books. And my books are modern, they take place today. I don't care. I lived it. I don't want to write about it. Nobody else wants to.
I don't think anybody wants to
No, they don't want
buy
to
it.
write about it. And so I don't reference it. I don't do that. But my sales actually did really well. And I think it's probably because more people were at home reading. But most of mine are online. So
I didn't have more time. I'm an office manager at a law firm here in town, and we have 3 offices. And people realized when they were home stuck with each other, they didn't like each other very well. So unfortunately, our business went way up. So we were essential and we did not get to go home.
I worked for DLO, picked up lab specimens. I drove up to Guyman 12 hours a day. I went up to Guyman and picked up 50-some COVID specimens a day. So I was real busy during that time. Up until about, started this year is when I retired. So up that time I was real busy during the pandemic.
Well, my muse decided she wanted to self-quarantine. And so my creativity was just out the window. Yeah, I normally write a book a year, but this last one took me 2 years because I didn't write much last year. I just, I would sit down and just blank space in my head, so.
I think it helps to have an event. I think it helps to have something to look forward to, something to
Right.
plan towards.
Sure.
And I think my what I needed to do spread out to how much time I had, so it was less productive.
Oh, I have.
Was it a nervous situation?
Here's the best advice I'm going to give anybody who's writing. You go to a conference. I went to OWFI my first year. I had no money except for my bar tab because I was like away from my kids and my husband for the whole weekend. But I was like, okay, I got to get this edited. I befriended a whole bunch of editors at this conference. And I said, listen, can I send you 4 chapters of my book and you just tell me what I'm doing wrong, a snapshot? I found 3, I sent all of them 4 different chapters. So I had the first 12 chapters of my book, looked at by 3 different editors. Thank goodness they all said I had the same problem. So I was able to fix it. But it was wonderful because I got that feedback before I ever did anything else to know where I was. And that is something, that's what writer conferences are for. They're really great at that. Those people who go there, all they want to do is help. Yeah, they want clients ultimately, but they really, truly want to help writers. Oklahoma Writers Federation and Inc. It's so weird.
And it was virtual in May.
Yes.
I believe it's going to be in person next year.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
normally in May.
And it's, go to their website because it'll book up fast. So you wanna, it's a lot of fun. You'll learn a lot too.
And there's a contest associated with it too. You can enter, there's like boatload
Yep,
of
you can enter
categories,
your
like
work.
40 categories. So
And you
whatever type of a short story or book you're writing, they have a category. And you can send your entry in. And sometimes in the category, they might have 5 entries.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might have 35.
Think you're not a good writer.
I was working on a sequel to this, and I submitted the first 20 pages and a synopsis, and I won first place.
And I don't like it. That's just not fair. It isn't fair.
Hey, you just go ahead and finish the book.
Just now.
See, that is awesome. I've submitted, I don't win
It does work.
Yeah, it does. Oh, it does. It absolutely.
When you get your books published, whether you're self-published, traditionally published, or however, you're gonna have your reviews.
Don't read the reviews. They're not
No,
for you.
you can read your reviews, but don't take your reviews to heart, because there's a big thing going on. And unfortunately, it happens in whatever kind of job you have. There's always some haters out there that tell you how much they love your books. So your heart just blooms, and you're like, yes, I'm doing the right thing. They love me, it's good. And then you'll have somebody that says, I wasted my money.
Or you have somebody who says, there was too much violence and gore, and you're like, it's a crime thriller.
Yes.
I don't read crime thrillers, so I don't like this one. Then what'd you read my book for? But the reviews are for
Yeah.
the readers.
Goodreads and the Amazon reviews, I mean, that's just anybody is putting something on there. I mean, that's a little bit different than if your reviews are coming from librarians or, you know, other writers or critics, yeah.
An agent told me once that authorspublish.com, they list places that don't need agents. If you're looking
Oh, yeah.
for a publisher that you don't have to have an agent to submit to, you can find lists of them on authorspublish.com. An agent told me about that.
So you have like, when you write a book, you have like 15, a page to catch your reader. And if you open a book and you're gonna talk about the stormy night and the freaking highways and the, you know, you're not gonna catch it because you catch, especially in horror. No, historically and all this stuff. You gotta catch that reader on the first page, first paragraph, whatever. They've got to be, carry them through the second paragraph. So make sure you write that opening page in your query, and or if they ask for a sample of the writing, I think they still do like 3 chapters or whatever. Make sure you capture your formatting right and your first sentence, even the first sentence or whatever, catches that person that's going to be looking at your writing.
Everybody here would love that to happen.
Would any of you ever dabble in screenplay writing?
Well, I was at a writers' conference, I think maybe 5. Or maybe it was a convention. Anyhow, there was these 2 filmmakers, 2 girl filmmakers from Tulsa, and they wanted to look at my books, and they made a short little film, Tulsa, and they made a story within mine called The Last Trick-or-Treater out of here. It's made into a short film. And then another company in Dallas optioned for 3 more stories out of here to be made into a movie, but they passed the 5-year mark, so they never did get the funding or whatever together. They were a professional movie company, and they had already hired the script writers to script. So I didn't even have to write the screenplays for that. So, but they never had anything come. They paid me for it. They paid me for it, even though they never used it. But it's really nice to see your name on the big screen
I would love
with a film up there.
Would you be willing to have someone else write the screenplay?
Yeah, if somebody did, usually from what I understand when somebody, so my stepfather, he wrote Buck and the Preacher. And then they took that and adapted it for the screenplay, and he helped with the screenplay writing as well. Obviously, if anybody were gonna take my book and write a screenplay, I would just make sure, hopefully they kept the essence, obviously, for what the story is. And some things have to be changed, because what you write doesn't always translate well on screen.
I definitely see my scenes as I write them.
Oh, yeah.
And because of my interest in nature and science. You know, I'm probably overemphasize that. And you were talking about on a dark and stormy night, or don't start with the weather or whatever. Well, with suspense, in Oklahoma, I mean, we've got a lot of weather. There's weather coming in right now, I've been checking. But, you know, creating that atmosphere to begin with. Like one of my books starts out with a woman who's caught in a hailstorm, and she's in a gallery, at a gallery area in Tulsa, and she turns into the window because the hail is banging around her head, and she sees a portrait of herself in the gallery window, trapped in a silver and white glass box, and she's clawing her way out, and it's her. So, I mean, she never would have turned into the window if she hadn't had hail pounding on her. So, you know, there's times like that when I think the weather is important.
Yeah, for sure. I did that with Secrets of Samuel Island, this one. And the hurricane came in just as things were ramping up. And it made it more exciting because they were running from the weather, but they were running from the bad guy.
The biggest thing is when you talk about making them into movies. When I first published The Obsession, my first book, my mom, she's a Hallmark fanatic. She can name everybody that's written for Hallmark. And she goes, "Are you going to be on Hallmark?" I said, "You need to read the book." She read the book and she goes, "You're not going to be on Hallmark." I said, "No, I'm not going to be on Hallmark. Might be on the new Hallmark Mystery Channel, but I will not be on Hallmark."
We'll have a really good success going to a writing conference because you can talk to agents there, and they're more likely when they're right one-on-one with you to offer to say, "Send me something to read." You might have a lot more success going to a writing conference and seeing an agent in person.
And most of the writing conferences will have that. If you book, what you'll do too is when you sign up, I keep referring to OWFI, but they're really good at this. When you sign up for their conference, they'll have, if you want to sign up with an agent, you have to block out the time well before the conference. And you get in and you block out your time, and they'll have different agents for different genres.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope everyone brought your pocketbook. We have lots of books here for sale and for signing. Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you so much.